Tell me about the challenges facing the Irish Church since the beginning of COVID and now to where we are today, 1 year later.
Well, now 1 year later, the churches have been closed effectively for public worship. Now, in saying that, they can open for funerals and weddings, but they're limited to 10 people. I was at a funeral in Westport today, and whilst we're supposed to be limited to 10 people, I guarantee you there were more than 10 people. Like, the town came to a standstill today. Young man, just 70, 72, very popular man from Galway who died, who had been living here for the last 40 years, died. But the church's public worship has not gone on in Ireland for the best part of a year, really. And it has caused a lot of frustration. We have, if I go back to this time last year when the churches closed, you had guys scrambling for Zoom and Facebook mass and services. And it put awful pressure on guys, as you can imagine, Francis. Like, most of our guys are over 70 in this country. There are very few younger priests. And all of a sudden then, they were forced to learn new skills like dealing with Facebook, social media, Zoom, all that kind of stuff. And then they had to learn, if you want, to say mass to an empty church. And then that was beamed out all across the way. Then there was, you know, you might have Father X, who wasn't great looking at the camera, and you have Father Y, who was a natural. So you have people in Father X's parish then who's, you know, they're tuning into Father Y. You had a lot of that stuff, and it actually caused a lot of upset among the older priests, believe it or not, this time last year. And it took it a few months to settle down, you know. And now we have a lot of people who are mass surfers. You know, they sit back at home and say, well, where will I go for mass today? You know, because they can go anywhere now. Absolutely anywhere.
Tell me, Liamy, once restrictions are completely lifted, do you think the church will ever get back the Irish congregations of times past, although they were small in times past?
Yeah, no, I think the way we're all looking at it here is that, like, congregations were going down anyway in Ireland, and that COVID has probably knocked us on about, you know, I don't know how many years, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. Older people, like the backbone of the church, older people, mainly women, now know that it's okay, they can have mass at home. And you see, I'm telling you, say about my ministry. One of my ministries here is, when I say mass here in my own house, but I don't know how many pyxes that I bring round to people, and I give mainly to women, and women will redistribute communion. And that's the way it's going. It's going back to that now in a lot of parishes, that people have their own pyx going to collect communion. They'll tune into mass wherever it'll be, usually the local parish, and they'll join the priest then with communion.
So they now have a comfort zone, you know, staying at home, watching mass on TV, and knowing restrictions will lift very, very soon. It seems doubtful. It seems doubtful.
Sorry, now, in the last hour, there was an announcement here from the government. In 2 weeks' time, they're going to lift restrictions somewhat. So public worship will be reintroduced in 2 weeks' time, but we're limited to 50 people in a church. And you see, a lot of people are fed up with the generalizations, because some of our churches, as you know, Francis, they're massive. They're very big churches, and they're all worked out as in, you know, it's one seat or one pew in 3 that's operational, and then each end of the pew, unless it's from a family, that they can sit together. So I mean, it's well organized, but we could fit a lot more than 50 people in some of the churches. And then what happened a few weeks ago, a lot of the bishops had put pressure on the government to reopen public worship over the last number of months. But 2 weeks ago, out of the blue, they brought in what we call a statutory instrument, which is a law that stated that gathering in a public place, including a church, for public worship was a criminal offence. And it caused a lot of anger among people. You know, you go back, you know, your Irish history and Cromwell and penal laws and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people went back and throwing that at it. And there's one guy, I don't know if you've ever come across him, a guy called Declan Gandy. He was in the Libertas. He had his own political party. He'd be, you know, right-wing Catholic. he has taken the government to court on this, and the decision is still pending. He reckons that the government is infringing on our constitutional rights because, a bit like America, we have a written constitution in this country. So our rights are they're written, they're very protected in this country when it comes to the constitution. Like the government cannot change the constitution. It's only the people who can change the constitution through a referendum.
Yeah, and is it still regarded as a criminal offence, or did they reverse course on that?
No, it's still regarded as a criminal offence, but they came out and said, "Oh, it wasn't our intention. Our intention was it was a criminal offence where people gathered, blah 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 blah." You know how they work. You know how politicians work yourself.
And like the Irish government is in a rut because it's a coalition. I've no doubt that you have three leaders feuding amongst themselves, which is not helping the country as a whole.
Yeah, we have like it's a mess. Our politics is a complete mess. I mean, last year we had Fine Gael in power. Right? You're familiar with the politics. It's kind of which shade of right do you want? Because they're all right. And which shade do you want? And they just wanted to keep out Fine Gael. So all the Civil War enemies came together to form a coalition so they could keep out Sinn Féin, the Republican, as in Irish Republican, not American Republican, Irish Republican, because they saw them as, oh, we can't have Sinn Féin in power,
To keep Mary Lou out of office.
Exactly. And then the irony of this is that the two main parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, both of them emanated from Sinn Féin anyway, if you go back. That's the way it was.
Wow. So listen, Liamy, now say the younger priests and the newly ordained priests, what's morale like for them knowing that they've lost that early enthusiasm that all priests had after ordination and so early in ministry to be isolated, and removed from public worship?
Well, there's a big presumption in what you're saying when you say newly ordained priests. We have very few newly ordained priests. In Ireland last year, we had one priest, one man ordained priest, just one. And he was for our diocese, as it happens. And we have him here in Westport. And he's a real gift. He's a lovely young man, fine young man. But, he's good because he's part of a team. And, you know yourself, the young guys go into parishes, like town parishes, where there are one or two other priests. So he's in Westport with Liamy McAnally, another priest. So, I mean, he has that bit of support. But yes, I know what you're saying. The honeymoon period didn't last long for a lot of young priests.
And tell me, Liamy, like one newly ordained for the whole country for 5 million people, what went wrong? Why does the Irish Church have no vocations anymore?
That's the kind of $100 million question anymore. But you see, what has done fierce damage in this country is the whole child abuse thing. It has done irreparable damage in this country. And no matter what anyone says, that's the bottom line. That has done irreparable damage. And then what has happened is that the church, we have a lot of bishops and we have some fine men, and individually, most of them are great men. But collectively, when they come together, it's like, you're just slowing everything down. Whatever it is, it's like something comes over them and they cannot think as a body. And then they won't think for themselves as individuals. Backwards we've been going here in the last 20 years when it comes to church reform or anything like that. I mean, a lot of people would be critical, say, of the great man that he was, Pope John Paul II. Great man, but at the same time, the church didn't move forward under his stewardship. The same with Benedict. It didn't move forward for people. And what happened with a lot of young people is the church is completely irrelevant. It's not an issue, Francis, for young people anymore. And that's the reality. And we're back into evangelization territory now in Ireland. We are back into evangelization territory.
Wow.
And what has happened with no priests is that some dioceses have brought in priests from India and places like that. And that's just putting a little a bandage over the wound. That's not the answer. Not the answer. We need to redefine what church is in this country. And COVID will, for better or for worse, will help us do that some way. And we will be going back to, the small, like the house churches at some level. Sure, we'll have the big church for certain ceremonies and all that.
I sent you my response to my reading in the Irish Independent of
Yeah.
March 20th. Many priests are disillusioned by the very fact that bishops are clueless when it comes to what these men do as frontline caregivers. Why are the bishops so out of touch?
That's a good question, and we'd love to know that. As I said, individually, like these guys, most of them are fine men, great fun to be with, good thinking men, hardworking men. But when they get into a little group, whatever happens, you're laughing. You must have the same problem in America.
They lose all focus.
Well, they lose a kind of sense of reality. And I mean, you have to know, if you know some people who are on the inside. I mean, the Irish Bishops' Conference was controlled by one or two people. And you see, we have this internal struggle in Ireland, not just politically with what we call Northern Ireland. And I know some of your people might not be fully aware. Northern Ireland is 6 counties of the 9 counties of one of the Irish provinces. But Northern Ireland is not the Irish jurisdiction, it's British jurisdiction. And then you see the dioceses of Ireland go north and south. In fact, we have dioceses that straddle the border. The border doesn't exist because the diocesan boundaries were there before the political ones. This border is only 100 years old this year, believe it or not. You know, exactly. So we have bishops, we have like the Bishop of Armagh is the primate of all Ireland. The Bishop of Dublin is the primate of Ireland. So we have all that kind of stuff.
The new auxiliary, Michael Rowder. We were high school classmates in Kells.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yeah, for 5 years. He's now the auxiliary in Armagh.
Oh, there's hope for you yet, so.
Francis. No, there's no. Trust me, I don't hang out in Episcopal circles.
Oh, well, no. I think you're going higher. You're wearing red. You have obviously higher.
It's a red T-shirt. So listen, Liamy, do you want to ask me some questions about?
You're in Texas, so I mean, coming up in what we've been doing in the ACP since lockdown and since COVID started, we have a whole series of Zooms. So we have looked with a guy called Paul Collins, the church in Australia. We looked at the church in Germany. We looked at the church in Britain. And then earlier on this week, we had James Allison, a man who ministers to people in the gay community. Like, how do we pastorally care for people in the gay community? And then coming up in 2 weeks, we have, if I can get his name right, Massimo Fagioli, is that it? Italian, but he's in America. But he's going to do the church in America for us, because we're fascinated by the church in America, because there's huge money in the church in America. But it's from our perspective, it's controlled by a lot of right-wing people. And we saw that in Dublin some years ago for the World Meeting of Families. Because for the World Meeting of Families, as part of the preparation, they did all these videos and all these books and blah, 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 blah. But one of the things was they just acknowledged that, there were families, of people who were gay. And then that was all pulled, because we understand that the people who were writing the checks said, no, we're not doing that. We're not going supporting that at all. And they had to change tack. And, it just caused a lot of upset again, because the church has this thing about gay people that kind of, you saw the CDF thing that came out 6 weeks ago, less than.
Yes.
We had a huge response to that, as you can imagine, from people very upset. And what happens with a lot of people, and as regards that, is that in some countries, because the church is universal, it's worldwide, in some countries, that puts people's lives in danger. That's the reality. And we had that on Tuesday night in the Zoom. We had people talking about that. That people, they know their lives are put in danger when the church comes out with this kind of stuff. Excuse me.
Because I have never blessed a gay union, and I don't believe any of my brother priests would have even blessed gay unions prior to CDF publication. But at the same time, I love gay people. Some of my friends, men and women, are gay, and they're so authentic and so genuine and great fun to be around. when you say there was uproar amongst the many in the gay community in light of the CDF and France's ruling against blessing gay unions, what kind of uproar did you all hear?
Well, it's just basically the people were very upset, very hurt by what was said about it. And you mentioned Francis as well. Francis gave it, I won't say the imprimatur, but he passed it. But there's talk now in Rome that he wasn't fully aware of what was going on, as in, so we'll see, what he's going to say. I don't know,
We'll see. Wow.
But people were disappointed with Francis actually approving the wording that went out. No, everybody knows as Catholics that, the Catholic Church is not going to approve of gay marriage, as in say, yes, we're for gay, but at the same time, for people who are gay, they're gay. That's it. And marriage is a civil act, nothing else. So the question, I remember one of our guys was questioned on the radio, well, would you bless a gay union? And he said, well, look, he says, it was just after St. Patrick's Day. He says, last week I was asked to bless what effectively is a weed in a garden, which is a shamrock. He says, this week you're asking me, would I bless the love between people, a commitment between two people? Okay, they're from the same sex. Would I actually ask the Lord to bless that love? He says, that's, it's a no-brainer. He says, so.
Yeah, so send me that link when Massimino gives the talk on the American
come
church.
through to you. Will come through. Now, just onto America. You see, as I say, the big thing we see here from America is that the church is controlled by very strong and rich right-wing sector. That's the way it's perceived for the most part in this country.
So when it comes to the American church.
Yes, so I don't know what your comment is on that. Yeah, and I see your bishops are meeting now. I see something yesterday that the bishops are meeting and they want to decide whether they should ban your president from receiving communion or something.
I had not heard that. I know some bishops are against him receiving our Lord. Yeah. Others may be neutral. Others, for example, if Joe Biden came to my church for Mass and I saw him walk down the aisle for communion, I would give him communion.
You would?
I would.
Yeah.
Who am I to judge?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's
and the moment, Liamy, the moment he walked down that aisle to receive, I believe I'm obligated to give him communion.
I agree with you. I just can't understand the thinking, why people would put themselves in such a position to think they can make such a judgment on someone. I mean, dear, but for the grace of God, go anyone at any time.
How often do we say at daily Mass, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you?
Yeah, exactly. None of us is for it. I mean, exactly. I remember David Trimble. I don't know if you remember David Trimble. Yes. He was the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, and something came up about Catholics. And he was chatting then to Paisley, and they were talking about Catholics. And he said, lads, the bottom line is, if he really believed that Holy Communion was the body of Christ and the wine was the blood of Christ, he says, you'd crawl on your hands and your knees up the aisle to receive. There's a lot of truth.
Amen. Yeah. And we do know, even in the Catholic world, so many Catholics do not believe in the real presence.
Oh, absolutely. And we can be so, if I may use the word, flippant with communion, and just, and now get communion and,
Yeah. I am blessed to be a part of the American church. They're we now have opened our churches. We now have all pews are open. We have the 3-foot social distance with the mask. But it's amazing, the moment those restrictions were lifted, we had standing room only. There was no hesitancy about coming back. There was no more the innate desire to have a Sunday on the couch. They were bursting to come back.
Yeah, but can I say, I'd make a suggestion, Francis, too. You see, Catholics in America, those who go to church are committed. Whereas we're just coming to the end of the cultural revolution, if you want to put it that way, of Catholicism. Because Catholicism was part of our culture. So a lot of people, they went to a Catholic school. Why? Well, there was no other school. It was only a Catholic school. So they were immersed in Catholicism, and then, but they weren't immersed in a living relationship with a living God. So now it's come to the stage where, well, I don't need that anymore. So we're just coming to the end of the kind of cultural Catholicism in this country. And that's why we're back, as I said earlier, we're back now into the evangelization stage in this country. This was once the land of saints and scholars. Yeah, but that was a long time ago. I was even before your time.
Tell me, and then you mentioned the priests coming in from India and elsewhere. How do the local congregations receive these priests coming from other countries?
Oh, yeah, I mean, people are very generous and open-hearted, as you know, in the country here. You know, and people love to have a priest, but it's fine at that level. But you're into all the nuances of culture then that are lost. You know, like we're different. We're not like the English. We're Hibernos. We're Hiberno English. We don't speak English. We speak Hiberno English, Irish English, if you want. We think differently because even in the English language, we think through the Irish language because Irish is still running through our veins, you know, the Irish language. So when we take people in from other cultures, first of all, there's very often, there's only a short culturization program, if you want. You can't learn all the nuances of people, you know, in that time. So what's happening is they're just becoming sacramental dispensers. We have the priest, he'll say mass, we'll get communion, job done, thank you. You know, but you see, priesthood has to be about a lot more than being a sacramental dispenser. And I'm not saying I don't want to sound negative against the Indian people. Again, I know some of these guys, and they're fine men, fine, and some of them are very holy. I don't mean pious. I mean holy men, really, really holy men, lovely men. You know, but generally we have the problem with, as I said, we have a cultural problem when that happens.
Yeah, like there's no enculturation for these men. They're just deposited, you know,
That's
in
right.
Ireland without any advance preparation whatsoever. My coming to Texas, you know, as a seminarian, it was part of the package to come each and every summer, so I could be enculturated into a different personality of parish, you know, over 7 years. So at least it took, my training included 7 years of enculturation by coming in advance as a seminarian.
So what's your diocese then? Which diocese are you?
I am with the Archdiocese of San Antonio, Texas.
Oh God, an archdiocese, not just a diocese.
Oh, we are very high profile.
Like Tuam, like here, like an
like
archdiocese.
Tuam. So listen, Liamy, this was really, really nice. If you know of any other men who or women who would like to be a part of another conversation later on, you know, let me know and we can organize a Zoom. You know, I try every Tuesday or Wednesday, I have a conversation with different people in my parish about how life is for them based on their respective ministries and their vocations and their professions. So this is really a nice way for our people to see what goes on at our parish at a deeper level outside of the church setting.
Sure, yeah.